This is the Situation Room on Spice FM. If you're tuned in from Nairobi on 94.4, 87.9 in Mombasa, and 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret on 96.7, Nyeri on 90.9, Kisumu on 102.5, and Malindi on 97.7. You're in the Situation Room this morning with Siti Muga and myself, Nduoko, and we are having conversations that affect society, definitely affect or impact the way in which we live in this country. Today is the International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities, CT, and we started off the conversation looking at, albeit quickly, what is really happening and what is the state of affairs when it comes to protections, when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to really looking at how things are running. We're also on KTN Home this morning. The live stream is up on Spice FM KE on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And so we continue with this conversation. Soon we're going to be having a conversation then with the law, and when it comes to putting some of these protections in place from the legislative arm of things. But City, even as we look and have this conversation, anybody can say whatever they want to say, and we can talk about the different laws. I mean, we don't want for provision when it comes to laws and policies that have been written up and put in place, but in terms of their actual implementation, if we're saying absolutely have an inclusive society when it comes to bringing in people who may not have everything that they need, that would not be normal, living with disability, apart from just having a law in terms of its implementation, what's the bottleneck, what's the stop that doesn't allow these things to actually play out? And it's not a yesterday conversation. This has been decades.
It isn't, but also let me go back to my favorite point on such subjects, the education system. You see, all these things that matter to us must start mattering to us when we are impressionable, we are easy to influence, and that means when people are young. That's when you introduce them to these concepts and ensure that they actually understand them. So they grow up understanding it. So because in schools which are not specific for people with disabilities, they will come across students who have disabilities, understanding the range that we do understand of disability, so that even as they mix and mingle with people who have disabilities, they understand how it is. They ought to regard this, and it doesn't become something unusual or bizarre. It becomes just a condition that someone has. In the same way as somebody has brown eyes as opposed to green eyes, as opposed to whatever.
It's normal.
An oval head as opposed to a round head, as opposed to a square head with such a head. Normal. It's just a variety. Now, also, you get to understand how to handle and manage people who have disabilities, understanding their perspective from the disability that they have. You see, when children are in school, a lot of the views that society have or hold are actually played out. Like you'll find, for instance, who are the children that other children make fun of in school?
Yeah.
And where do these children get the idea that this is the sort of person you should make fun of? It's from their parents.
Oh, that this person is abnormal.
Yes, it's the community that they come from. For instance, one of the things that you will find in many young people is they stammer. You'll be made fun of, and it's not as though it will improve your condition. All I'm saying is we need to understand that when someone is not like you, when someone is different, it doesn't mean that there's something bad or something negative about it. It's just that they are not like you. They are unusual.
Yes, they are. I mean, they are, and that just means that they're not like you.
They're different.
They're different. It doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to operate just as you would.
It's a broad range.
So, I mean,
but you have to
understand.
Yes,
it. So
you do.
It has a lot to do with the mental. So even if you're having it has a lot to do with your understanding of this. So even if we're looking at change and inclusivity, then any kind of behavioral change has to be for everybody else to understand that, look, we're bringing in and we're including people who are just like you. It's just that there's one thing that they're not able to do in a capacity such as yours. We're bringing in this morning Westlands MP Timothy Wanyonyi, who is not a stranger to a lot of these conversations that we've had in the past when it comes to inclusivity of people living with disabilities in Kenya, around the world, and things that should or should not be done. Mheshimiwa Timothy Wanyonyi, good morning and welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, On this day, we are commemorating, celebrating, and we're saying that again, a memory be spared or a thought be spared for the fight and the work that is being done for inclusivity for people living with disabilities around the world. But as we're having this conversation specifically in Kenya, strides have been made, improvements have happened. However, there seems to be a very, very long way when it comes to what needs to be done to almost get people to forget, and I'm going to say this carefully, to forget that there are people living with disability in the country and treat them as every other Kenyan. There's a huge gap, Mheshimiwa, and why is that, and why have we not been able to close that gap?
I think, first of all, we have to change the mindset of people, because we can legislate, we can bring up all manner of laws, beautiful laws. And we have had this Persons with Disabilities Act, which was enacted in the year 2003, which is almost 17 years down the line. We have the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, which was passed in the year 2006, and Kenya signed and ratified, and all these things are contained there. But you see, for us to move forward, we must change how we look at people with disability. The moment you see a person with disability, what do you think? What do you see? For example, if I'm coming to you and with my wheelchair, what will you see first? Will you see the wheelchair first, or will you see me first?
Sure.
I will definitely see the wheelchair first. Yes.
Yes, that's what we need, because the person comes first before the wheelchair, isn't it?
Right.
The moment you start seeing me differently, because, for example, sometimes after my accident, when I used to go home, when I reached there, my mother used to see me and she just cries. But these days, when I go, she doesn't cry. She just sees me as her son and the normal person. So with my attitude, I changed her mind.
Sure.
And now she sees me that I'm just able to do anything like anybody else is. So we need just to unlock the minds of people. The attitude, in fact, attitude is what makes disability, not disability itself. Because the moment people have this kind of attitude that a disabled person is a person, for example, they use a Swahili word as asiyechiweza. It means I'm not able to do anything.
Sure.
So those are the things that we need just to fight, and once we have changed the mindset, then the rest will just fall in place.
The rest will fall in place. You gave an example of how you were able to change a mindset of somebody who was within your family. And here you are, a legislator in a country. Yes, many see you and they see you, your wheelchair first, as opposed to seeing you. But I mean, look at the heights that you have been able to scale. Many would say that maybe conditions were different and able to get to the place where you were. But I mean, it is clear that somebody who has a disability, if we're going to call it that, can actually get to the place whereby they will be accepted in society, but it takes time. What is it that we can do? Because, forever the fingers keep pointing at those who legislate, the fingers keep pointing at those who govern. But can you really put in legislation that is essentially going to change the way people think? Because then if you change the way people think, you then change the way people act, and that will spur them on into other things. Can legislation come about that will affect the way people think, that then will inevitably bring about change in this sector that we are looking for?
If you look at the Persons with Disabilities Act, there even a section that deals with criminalizing anybody who, for example, having a person with disability in their family, and you conceal that person. You don't want him to be known. You don't want the world to know that you have a person with disability. These are some of the things that are there, but they are still happening. All what we need to do is, I think we must do serious civic education, that people with disability have rights, and their rights are human rights. They are not different from any other person. And for us to move, because we cannot legislate on everything until we change the way the society deals with certain issues. Some cultural, behavior, which sometimes some cultures, a person with disability is treated like just a thing. You don't exist. They can even sometimes when something happens, they can leave you somewhere there to die. So we just need to inculcate in people to understand that a child with disability is just a child. He must be taken to school. He must be given everything else that the other children are being given. So
from a legislative point of view, then, because we see that some things essentially need to be forced for that mental change to take place. So if there are things put in place, for example, to quote unquote force that these children be taken to school. So what does that mean? That within schools provide sectors or departments where people who have disabilities can go to school without fear or favor. To say that, for example, when there's COVID-19 in the country and they need a boost, make sure that it is given to them. When we need to say that all buildings in the country, for example, need to have ramps, need to have a quota, or all companies need to have a quota where people with disability are hired, regardless of what kind of disability they have, so long as they're able to function. Don't you see this as a way in which legislation then would come about to essentially force it? Because then if you see people who are sitting in these positions in corporate, for example, sitting in these positions in government, for example, still being able to get a job done, people from the outside looking in will see, all right, the work is being done. It's not necessarily because you don't know if it's a full able-bodied person there, whether it's somebody who's living with a disability. The job is being done. If you come to see later that it's actually someone with a disability sitting in that position, then you realize it begins to change your mental thinking that it doesn't matter who is there, so long as they're able to do the job, it can get. So I see it as a way in which, if legislation is in place, you're forcing things like this to happen by making sure you have created these positions in the schooling system, in the work system, in the corporate sector. People's minds will change, because if we sit and wait and say, have conversations with people living with disabilities and your mind will change, I see that taking a very long time. But if government is fully vested in making sure that some of these changes take place, I see that as contributing to the mind change set that we're essentially looking for.
Can I tell you that all these things you are mentioning are already there in the legislation? We just need to implement that act, because even in the act, when it was enacted 2003, it was given like 5 years for all building owners to make adjustment and make them accessible to people with disability. Do you know, up to today, no such buildings, very many buildings don't have those facilities. The media houses, like nowadays, I've seen they have implemented that. That when they're reading news, we need to have somebody with sign language who is interpreting for those who cannot hear.
Sure.
Which now it has been implemented. If you go to the bank, if you go to the supermarket, a person who is deaf and they cannot communicate, how will the people there serve it? Those are some of the things that are in the act. They are there. So what we need to do is just, I think people who are in place, we have, as we legislate, but those who implement the laws are different. The Persons with Disabilities Act was enacted at the same time with the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, and the Kenya National Human Commission was enacted, implemented very quickly. The Persons with Disabilities, it took 10 years for it to start being implemented. Even giving the money to the National Council, which is supposed to be the one now, the focal point to implement the act, it is a tall order. They come and then everything is taken away. They're just given money for administration. So they cannot even devolve. They cannot even go out there and start advocating or educating people on how to do it. But to cut the long story short, is that maybe let me give you an example. I hope it's not against the policy of your media.
Well, let's hear it.
It is an example that you're giving.
Yes. I'm giving an example of Safaricom. When, I started an organization and we were dealing with issues of advocacy, issues of creating awareness and all that. And we wanted people with disability to be employed. So we approached Safaricom and we talked to them Then Michael Joseph was the CEO. And I asked him if they can implement. He said, first of all, tell us what we need to do at our workplace before we bring them on board. So we gave him an example. We said, just take a few, maybe 2, 3. Once they're at a workplace, you'll know what to adjust, what the needs they need. And the guy took it very positively. And now when you go to Safaricom, they have got a whole department of customer care, which with people with disability. And with them being at the workplace, they knew what need to be adjusted, the washroom, the level of the desk, and the size of the door, and all that, creating ramps, so that the movement is easy. So if we have people who are ready to listen and implement, it becomes very easy.
As a legislator, Mheshimiwa, let me just ask, how many schools, government schools for people with special needs, do we have in the country?
I can't really tell how many, but there are very few.
Yes, there are 6 to be precise, actually. There's the reason why I'm asking this question from the perspective of a legislator, which is who you are. Now, legislators, members of parliament, have MPs have a constituency development fund that is supposed to help them look after the needs and the interests of their constituents, okay?
Yeah, yes.
Is there a special push to have even this particular fund cater for the needs of people with special needs? Is there a budgetary item that looks into the needs of these people with special needs within the CDF?
Within the CDF, we cater for education. So if it's about education, it falls under the CDF. But the other thing is that what was being encouraged, even in the law and even in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, is to integrate children with disability in the normal learning system. Unless the child has got very severe disability that cannot go in the normal school, we just make adjustment in the normal school and allow children to integrate so that they learn together and know and understand each other, so that these other children can know the limits, the limitations that the other child has, and then they can learn how to integrate with him and play with him and do all things with him, other than just seeing him at a far distance or in a separate institution. So this is a kind of policy, and I've gone to the US and I went specifically to see how they do it in their schools, and I found that children with various forms of disability are learning together with children who don't have any disability. And you find the teacher sitting there and sometimes they're using sounds, they're using different methodology of teaching. And it is a very good system that brings these children together to learn and understand that a child with disability and a child without disability are just children, so that they can go out there. Even when they go to play, you see these children even carrying this other person to take her to the field so that they can play together.
Why do you think they've been able to do this, Mheshimiwa? Why have they been able to do this? To have a system that is so well integrated with 2 different cadres of children being taught in the same space. Why? Yeah. What provisions have they made that has enabled them to do this?
They have met, for example, if you are building a building and instead of putting a staircase, you put a ramp. And this ramp can be used by anybody. You who is walking, a person with a wheelchair, and all that. And when you go to the classroom, when you go to the washroom, they have made all adjustments, because those things can be used by children with disability, can be used by children without disability, and they are just in place there. And it doesn't cost anything extra. I can give you an example. I've done some schools where we had to go and make adjustments. And right now, when I'm constructing any classroom, I tell my contractors, don't put staircase, put ramps, so that children with disability, when they come, they can access. They can go to classroom, they can sit like any other child and learn, and all that. So we just need to improve on our system. And these things, as we speak now, we are going to repeal the Persons with Disabilities Act, and we are coming up with a new act, which now will be aligned to the Constitution and also to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, so that it captures all these things we are talking about, so that at the time when people will be implementing, they'll have no excuse of of saying that it's not captured in the law. For example, there is in the law there is a provision that people with disability are supposed to retire at the age of 65. But you go to many of these agencies, government agencies, in their computer it just reads a person retires at 60. So it's just 60, the guy is given a letter and they say, so until we had to amend the law and amend various legislations to be able to keep that, because that was given as a government policy. It was not captured in the law. So we had to amend several legislation so that thing is now captured, and then we send it out to the those employees. And some of them were given, like for example, the AG, who is the government, legal person, and then they're retiring somebody at that age, and then that thing is, they told us this thing is not in the law. Until you put it in the law, then we can work it on. We can bring it up like that. So we put it in the law.
It looks like you have your work cut out for you. There's something you said that I found disturbing, and it's actually been doing the rounds in my mind. Monies budgeted, allocated, then taken away. How do you win this fight? Because if you have a body that is supposed to look after the interests of people with disabilities, to advocate, and yet they do not have the funding, they will certainly not be able to do their work. How do you unlock this?
We are, now in Parliament, we have a caucus of persons members with disability, of which I'm the chairman. And we have told this institution when they are coming, because now the budget is met at Parliament.
Yes.
When they are bringing their estimates, first of all, they come and invite us in a small meeting, a brief meeting. We go and sit with them and see what is it they are bringing. And then we shall go to this committee that deals with the budget, and we go and lobby, because these things is just about lobbying. We lobby and tell them why we need these people to be given more money. And this actually has worked, because from being given 200 million, a budget for 200 million per year, now we are giving them over 2 billion shillings, which can now enable them even to devolve their functions and take them to the counties, because that's where we want to go. That they must go to the people, not people coming to them, to make sure that they are delivering services, and are also making sure that people with disability understand their rights. And that one, we must do it without, it should not be something that like you are doing somebody a favor. It's a right. It's their right to know that they're supposed to do ABCD. We are supposed to give them wheelchairs free of charge. We are supposed to give them all devices that they're supposed to use. People with the blind, to give them those braille books and all that, so that they can be able to access some of the information that is in online or something like that. Yesterday, I was participating in something that the banks are doing. They are trying to now improve their workplace and also bring people with disability to enjoy the banking product.
Halls. Right, sure.
Yes, so they go to bank, they can access the ATMs, they can access whatever. So that they are trying to, they have done a pilot project, but now with yesterday when we went through, we had to do some adjustment and tell them do this, do that, so that when people are showing the intent to do something, then you see now we are going the right direction.
The right direction. Honorable Timothy Wanyonyi, we want to thank you for being in the Situation Room with us this morning. Definitely a lot of work to be done, and we're going to follow up with you in terms of how all of this plays out in the future. Definitely important conversations to have. Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa.
Asante sana. Enjoy your day.
Asante.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.